Greetings to you and welcome to this episode of Grace Podcast. I'm Timothy Muse. I'll be your host as we spend this time together today. It's a joy to be with you. I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to thank you for making this podcast a part of your process. And I want to thank you for being on this process. As always, it is so awesome that you're here. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for continuing to invest. If this is your first time on the podcast listening, thank you for being here. Welcome aboard. I hope this is something that you can find productive and profound. If it is, then please share it out there. Put it out there for others to see, to hear, to experience. If you have been following along and you're coming back, then welcome back. Thanks for coming and thanks for continuing to support this effort. Like I said, if it is powerful, if this podcast is powerful, please share it out there. Put it out there in your social media feeds. I post on LinkedIn, X, Instagram, and Facebook. If you follow me or the life coaching on any one of those feeds, you're going to see these episodes. If you're on one of the listening platforms, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or Amazon Music, then follow us. Give us a rating and review. Every positive rating and review helps the platform to know that people are listening, and you'll get notifications when a new episode comes out. And if you want to reach out to me directly, GraceLifeCoaching.com. That's the website. I'd love to hear from you. GraceLifeCoaching.com. It's got my contact information. If you want to do some coaching, if you want to have a conversation, if you want to schedule some time, that's where you can get a hold of me, GraceLifeCoaching.com. It's got all my contacts and stuff. So please reach out. I really, truly would love to hear from you and see where you're at and see if I can come alongside you and help you in this process. So we're going to keep going in this process of what the coming of spring can teach us, where we're going to go. Last episode, we talked about protecting early growth, nurturing the small beginnings that are just starting to emerge. But I want to go a little bit deeper today into a truth that every season of growth eventually confronts. Sometimes the most important progress is happening when you can't see it. So we want to trust the process. Patience while growth is unseen. Patience while growth is unseen. And if you're in a season right now where things feel slow, where results feel delayed, where progress feels invisible, this episode will be for you. And that's what I'd like to bring. So let's begin. Let's get into it. Again, when we mirror nature, when we look at nature, the first visible sign of spring is not the first sign of growth. Growth begins underground. Roots expand, nutrients are absorbed, cells divide, the plant strengthens, the soil shifts to support the development. And long before anything breaks through the surface, your personal growth mirrors this exactly, all right? There are seasons where you've been consistent, you've been showing up, you've been trying, you've been healing, you've been practicing, you've been patient, but you don't see the results yet. Now, that doesn't mean that nothing is happening. It means everything is happening deeper than you can see. Growth often develops roots before it develops results. Okay? Hear that again. Your growth, your personal growth often develops roots before it develops results. When you want to have results, you have to have something to be able to support them with. That's where the root structure, the basis begins. But that's a challenge. We struggle with the invisible progress. We really do. Because we as adults, we use responsibility, achievement, and production as signs of progress. And we become uncomfortable when that progress isn't obvious. When we use those things like achievement and productivity, we want proof, we want evidence, we want validation, we want visible outcomes and measurable change and something to point to. But growth isn't linear. We've talked about this many times, and I want to say that again. Growth isn't linear, and progress isn't always visible. And this is the truth that may challenge you. This is the truth that may dig deep. Your impatience doesn't mean the process is failing. It means your expectations need to adjust. That's hard. It's not that progress, because it's not seen, is failing. It just means that we need to adjust our expectations. Invisible progress is still progress. In fact, invisible progress is the foundation of visible progress. Without what happens underground, nothing survives above ground. This is hard for us, especially in the immediacy of our world where we want to see something now. When we want to grow and really, really grow, we need to build that deep internal root structure. Underground. Inside. That's what supports the stuff that survives above the ground. And it really is important. Now, we struggle, we challenge because we are in the immediate process life. We want things now. So we need to shift our mind and our expectations and really start talking about how this affects us. So let's dig into the psychology of delayed progress. Let's talk about what happens in your mind during seasons when growth isn't obvious. Look, our brains, we naturally seek patterns and predictability and reward and feedback. That's how our brains work. And when we don't see results, when we don't see that pattern and the predictability and the reward and the feedback, then our brain immediately goes to say there's something wrong. This isn't working. But that interpretation is not accurate. It's incomplete because the brain cannot recognize underground process. The brain can only see what is visible. So your job becomes learning to trust what is developing internally. This is how we have to shift our mindset, how we have to shift our brain. You don't wait for the brain to approve the process. You train the brain to believe in it. That's emotional maturity, my friends. That's resiliency. That's growth from the inside out. We have to retrain our brain to not just look for those patterns and predictability and reward and feedback. We have to train our brain to trust the process, that something is happening inside and it is worth it. And part of the way we do that is recognizing some of the signs of invisible progress. They're not dramatic results, but your life leaves clues, my friends. Your life leaves clues. You start to see the power of those roots. And here are some signs that growth is happening even when you can't see it. Maybe you react more calmly than you did before. And again, you don't necessarily see that. Maybe you have to look back on it. You recover faster from stress. You notice your habits improving, all right? You catch old patterns sooner. You speak more kindly to yourself. This is a big one. We speak more kindly to ourselves. We're more gentle with ourselves. You're more aware of your feelings, or you're choosing healthier boundaries, or maybe you're less drawn to old coping mechanisms that you were before, or you're thinking ahead rather than backwards. And maybe you feel subtle internal shifts. These aren't flashy changes, but they're foundational ones. And the foundational changes lead to outward transformation. Again, I can't stress this enough. The more that the shoot comes up out of the ground, the deeper the roots have to grow. And if the roots don't grow deep, it can't sustain the visible signs. It can't sustain the visible growth. Look, and there's the moment, when we get into every season, there's the moment in every season of growth that looks like nothing is happening. But in reality, you're almost there. I'm always real impressed with the bamboo plant. The bamboo plant is something that it's planted in the ground, and it takes between 4 and 5 years for the seed to sprout. It takes 4 to 5 years for the seed to sprout and germinate. But when it does, the growth of a bamboo plant is exponential. It will grow very fast, and all of a sudden, it'll go from nothing to 4, 5, 6 foot stalks of bamboo. Okay? But if we give up on the bamboo plant after 3.5 years, we never get anything. So there's a moment in every season of growth where it looks like nothing is happening, but in reality, you are almost there. And you can have those feelings. There's ways to identify that. This phase can feel like, frustration or doubt or restlessness or decreased motivation or the urge to quit or questioning your path or thinking the effort isn't worth it. That's a place, that's the moment where we need to push forward. That's the moment most people stop. Most people stop, not because they're incapable, but because they misinterpret closeness as failure. This is the moment when we get frustrated, when we get, when we have doubt and restlessness. This is the moment we need to want to keep pushing forward, not give up on the process. So let me say this again. People quit not because they're far from success, but because they are closer than they realize. It is not because they're incapable. They just misinterpret the closeness as failure. When the root system is complete, the sprout appears suddenly, and it grows fast. But growth can feel slow until it doesn't. It can feel like, I'm just building these roots and it's going to take forever, and all of a sudden, boom, something happens. We want to make sure that we give time and space for the roots to grow, so that which we are going to bring forward to the world has strength and power. So there's a mindset shift that we want to do here. We want to transform our mindset. We want to stop asking, when will I see results? When will I see results? And start asking, who am I becoming through this process? Who am I growing into being? Look, this is not baking a cake, okay? We don't mix all the ingredients together, throw it in the oven, and boom, we have a cake. This is a process. Growth is a process. And as we go through this process, we want to stop asking the when will I see results and start asking who am I becoming through this process? Because results happen in moments, identity happens daily. Results happen in moments. It will happen. All of a sudden you'll be like, oh my goodness, there it is. I just had that moment. I just saw that. But who am I becoming in this process? Who do I want to become in this process? Who am I looking to become in my future self? Because look, when we shift focus from outcome to identity, it reduces pressure. It reduces the pressure. I will become who I'm to become as I'm doing it. It increases consistency. I'm not looking for an outcome. I'm looking for the discipline. It strengthens self-trust. I can keep doing this. I can keep doing this, and I can keep investing even if I can't see the outcome. It builds resiliency, the ability to bend and flex. It helps us to feel grounded. It develops patience, and it creates stability. Patience is not waiting quietly. Patience is trusting deeply. Now, it may look like waiting quietly, but we're trusting deeply. We're being patient with ourselves, and we're being patient with the process because it doesn't happen overnight. You didn't get here overnight. You're not going to get out of here overnight. That's just how it works. That's just how the process is. And one of the big keys of building a good root structure is trusting the process. Trusting the process. People say this phrase all the time, but rarely define it. Trusting the process. It means believing that consistent efforts compound. It means understanding that growth takes time. It means accepting that progress may be invisible and choosing discipline over urgency. It may be releasing the demand for instant results. That's a hard one. That's a hard one in the age of high speed and fiber optics. We want results now. Continuing even when we feel discouraged. This is what it means to trust the process. Adjusting without abandoning. Partnering with your future self. Who are you becoming? And remembering that roots come before results. Trust is not passive, my friends. Trust is active. It is a choice that you make every day to trust the process. I encourage you to trust the process. I encourage you to be gentle with yourself in trusting the process. Take a breath and be still and understand that those roots are growing. The work you're doing is having an impact. It just may not be visible in what your results are looking for. So here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to reflect on some things over the next few days. Answer a couple of questions for me. What tiny sign shows I'm growing? Even if I cannot see it. Maybe your patience improves, Maybe you made a healthier choice. Maybe you're kinder to yourself. Dwell on that. What are some of the tiny signs that show that I'm growing, even if no one around me can see it? What are some of the roots that are digging deep inside of me right now? What old patterns do I interpret today? And how do I interpret them differently? How do I interrupt those old patterns? How do I see them, interpret them, and interrupt them? Everyone counts. Every time that we see an old pattern that we live into over and over again, and we can interrupt that pattern. Maybe it's a pattern of anger. Maybe it's a pattern of disconnecting. Maybe it's a pattern of running to the bar or to Amazon for relief or numbing. If we can interrupt those patterns just once, we start to see growth. That's growth. Growth is interrupting old patterns and replacing them with new ones. And the last question is, what do I trust is happening beneath the surface? What do I trust is happening beneath the surface? What is happening under the surface? Name the unseen progress, my friends. By the end of this, you'll recognize growth that's happening quietly and consistently and powerfully. And that's really what we want. That's how we can stay grounded and rooted in the process. When we can see that growth is happening, maybe it doesn't look massive, maybe it doesn't look huge, but we can start to see it. We can start to see growth happening. That's where we want to go. That's where we want to invest and increase. That's how we want to expand in our lives. Remember, my friends, that the most powerful growth happens where we can't see it. And when we can trust the process and trust that something is happening, then it will continue to move us forward. When we can really look at those patterns and those processes and really dig to see what's happening beneath the surface, that is what is most important. We don't plant a seed and dig it up every day to check if it's growing, my friends. We don't. You water it, you protect it, you trust it, you give it time, and you let the roots develop. You let the invisible work unfold. The same is true inside of us. We have to let the invisible work unfold. And there's no big splash in it. There's no big celebration. This is the hard work because nobody sees it. We don't get those places of celebration and pat on the back. This is the work that we have to do ourselves. We have to give it time and trust that it's happening and let the roots develop. Let the invisible work unfold. And then one day, without warning, the sprouts appear. And your life works the same way, just like a seed does. We plant the seed and we water it and we grow it and we let the roots develop and boom, all of a sudden there it is. Your life works the same way. The progress you can't see is often the progress you need the most. And then though it may feel like you're stuck, you're not. Though it may feel like you're failing, you're not. Though it may feel like you're falling behind, you're not. Remember, this isn't a competition. You're not in competition with anybody. You are just looking to grow yourself. You are rooting in this process. You are deepening and you are preparing. Spring reveals what patience builds. That's how it works. We look at this season and we see this season is barren and cold, and all of a sudden it's going to pop. But it's just not going to pop because it's decided to do it. Those roots have been growing. Those seeds have been germinating. Those things have been coming up. So remember, you're not falling behind. You're not failing. You're growing deeply in ways that you cannot see, but they're powerful. Trust in them. Trust in the process. Trust in yourself that you can do this, because I know you can. That's why you're here. That's what I got for you for today. I hope it's helpful. If it is, please share it out there. Put it out there in your social media feeds. If you're following on one of the platforms, then give us a rating and review. Remember, those platforms will indicate when a new episode comes out. If you want to reach out to me directly, GraceLifeCoaching.com is the website. I truly would love to hear from you. At Grace Life Coaching, we want you to be the best you.